Hello, everyone. I want to say a special hello to the young graduates who, without finding a job in their specialty, joined the ranks of couriers, sales assistants, low-level managers, and so on. Guys, I had the exact same situation. No prospects and no self-esteem after several unsuccessful interviews at big firms. But I had to make a living somehow. So I got a job as a manager selling water meters. The essence of the job was that I organized meetings of tenants in the entrances of apartment buildings and sold our world's best water meters to citizens. Needless to say, the work was specific. Scolding with pensioners, arguments with idiots, humiliation, stress. It was torture for me, a person, to put it mildly, unsociable. The last drop in the cup of suffering was the case I want to tell you about. One gloomy October day, as usual, I went up to the 9th floor of another panel building. I had to call all the apartments and invite the tenants to a meeting that was to be held on the 1st floor. As always happens, some promised to come, some refused, some came to the door, looked through the peephole and did not open. Soon I reached the 2nd or 3rd floor, I don't remember exactly, and called one of the apartments. From behind the shabby wooden door I heard a voice.
"Who are you?"
I, in turn, cheerfully and loudly began to explain that there would be a meeting in the entrance hall, that I was a representative of the best firm in the universe, and other nonsense. The same voice asked again.
"Who are you?"
I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, but it was clear that the person speaking to me was old and out of her mind. I was a little confused, but I introduced myself again. "My name is Steven, I'm the manager of Scamtech." After the third question,
"Who are you?"
I realized that it was useless to talk, and went on, only behind the unfortunate door the question sounded more and more often, louder and angrier. When the noise in the stairwell intensified, I went down the stairs to the 1st floor. 3 old ladies had already gathered there, with whom I said hello one more time, handed out business cards, and began to entertain them with stories about the fantastic savings on our meters. At first all went well, but after about 3 minutes I heard noise from the previous apartment, which made the conversation uncomfortable. A woman came down from the 4th floor and said to one of the old ladies,
"This madwoman is awake, go home."
All the old ladies got into the elevator and hurried to their apartments. The woman who came down said to me,
"You go too, no one is coming today. Go, go."
Yes, the evening at work had gotten off to a bad start. I stepped out of the entryway into the dank street air. It was already dark, and the lights were on in the windows of the houses. I walked a few meters away from the house and looked for the windows of that strange apartment. The lights were off, but the curtains twitched when I looked up. I had to keep working. Things got a lot better at the next entrance. More people showed up, they all took my business cards, gave their tentative consent to sign the contract, and the meeting took place outside, instead of in the smelly stairwell. Suddenly, in the light of the lantern that illuminated the next doorway, appeared the comical figure of an old woman wearing a green coat over some inconceivable robe that looked more like a rag. This scarecrow wore a torn earflaps on her head and woolen socks on her feet, in which the old woman paced the sidewalk.
"There's the crazy one,"
said the woman in years, hiding my card in her pocket.
"Goodbye, Steven."
The rest of the tenants of the house began to leave, too, and the closer the old lady came to us, the more the tenants disappeared into the entryway. When the old lady approached the entrance, only two men remained with me, who decided to have a smoke while sitting on the bench outside the entrance. I was about to leave in order to buy a beer and forget about the day. Suddenly I heard a question behind me that began to get on my nerves.
Who are you?
I answered in rhyme, and one of the men, the younger one, laughed softly. I turned and walked away from the house. I never like to argue with pensioners, especially crazy old women. The next day I worked at a different address because I didn't want to show up at that house again. I knew it was stupid, but I didn't want to be seen again by people who saw me talking to that old woman. When I had gone around to every house in the neighborhood to sell our products, I decided, with a heavy heart, to end up with that strange house, where I had 3 more appointments to make. As I passed by that house, I noticed a coffin lid standing by the door to the entryway. I looked at the picture of the deceased and was unpleasantly surprised. In the picture was the same man who had laughed at the old woman. He had the same hair and the same potato nose. Once again I marveled at our life. A couple of days ago this man was sitting smoking on a bench after work. He was still young, not even 50 years old, and suddenly his life was over. I felt uneasy. I didn't want to go into that apartment building and disturb the tenants, but work is work. My job was to torment the tenants, which I did. In the evening I came home, warmed up dinner, and sat in front of the TV. Soon my mother returned from work. Instead of entering the apartment, she slammed the door and stared through the peephole. "Mom, what's wrong?" I asked, surprised by her behavior.
Leave me alone.
She said in a whisper, waving me off. I started to get worried, but Mom stood there for a few more minutes, looking through the door peephole. Only after supper did she tell how at the bus stop an elderly woman came up to her, grabbed her arm, and would not let her go. The mother tried to break free, but the bony hand grasped her in a deadly grip. It didn't last long, but while my mother was trying to get away, the old woman said some nonsense in a hissing voice that really scared my mother. Finally, when she managed to escape from the old woman's clutches and dash for her life, the wicked witch ran after her and even got into the entryway. Then the old woman rang the doorbell of each apartment and, in a rattling voice, asked the astonished tenants,
Who are you?
And the doorbell rang several times at our apartment, but we just sat in silence and waited to see how it would end. The old lady was kicked out by our neighbor, Uncle Norman. He forcefully chased the troublemaker out of the entryway and only called an ambulance outside to pick up the lost crazy old woman. In the middle of the night we heard the doorbell ring again. A crying neighbor stood on the doorstep. Mom asked what happened. It turned out that Uncle Norman had had a headache last night and had raised his blood pressure. The neighbor asked me to help carry him out of the apartment to the ambulance. Uncle Norman died in the hospital a few days later of a brain hemorrhage. My mother was also negatively affected by this incident. It was as if she had grown old. Her hair turned gray, her eyes became cloudy. "Mom, what did that old woman say to you?" I asked, but instead of an answer I heard some nonsense.
I know who woke me up. Your son Stephen. And I had a son. But I ate him. But I didn't bury his bones. I will eat your son, too.
At these words her eyes became mad. She spoke for a long time, describing the process of cooking human meat mixed with some pagan incantations, and I at first quietly, then louder and louder begged her to stop. When I shouted at her, she suddenly changed her face, looked at me as if she didn't recognize me, and asked,
Who are You,